moving on to Kismet and the revival in 1965 at Lincoln Center. So Gemze is going to speak about assisting Jack Cole at that time.
Well, I was not a Jack Cole dancer, much to my regret, but when Kismet was done, the next show that they were doing was Carousel. And it turned out that all of Jack's assistants that he usually used were either in Europe or in California or not with him any longer. So Ed Greenberg, who was the director of Lincoln Center Productions at that point, asked him if it would be all right to ask me to assist him, and he seemed to say it was all right, because we were friends, not good friends, but I knew him socially. And so he broached the subject to me, and I said, well, I really don't know that technique that well, although I had danced with Buzz Miller and with lovely dancer Jack Miller, also a Jack. I hadn't really thought about that. But actually, Buzz was a lifelong friend of mine. And so I learned a lot about the technique. And I certainly had seen Jack a lot. So I agreed and went in with a little bit of trepidation, partly because I had heard all these stories about how mean he could be and what a taskmaster he was. So I glued my eyes on him from 10 o'clock in the morning until 6 o'clock at night, because I figured if I could just absorb some of the source of the movement, I could be of some assistance and a little bit of help. So he appreciated that, because so many times choreographers are killing themselves demonstrating, and the dancers are looking at themselves in the mirror instead of really trying to find out where the movement comes from. So anyway, about the third day, he had these quite wonderful dancers just tied up in knots. They were so rigid that they couldn't move, and he was giving some fluid movement, and they were just hopeless. It was just terrible. So I thought, well, am I an assistant or am I a big coward? And I screwed up my courage, and I said, Jack, I think maybe if I took them away, I could loosen them up for you. And I held my breath. And his face just relaxed, and he said, oh, do you think you could, Gemze? Please take them away. So a couple of days later, Jack finally at one point turned and he said, well, I see Gemze's wringing her hands again. I'd better leave. So we did some loosening up things again. This was a side of Jack that we don't really hear about that much. I also loved him for the fact that he worked full out in such a fantastic way all day long. He never asked anybody to do what he would not do himself. And he was a pretty great man, I think, and a very sweet, nice man.
And before we show the clip from Kismet, Stuart Hose has a couple of stories.
I was a Martha Graham dancer, so I guess I was a little surprised when I got a call from George Martin. Oh, being a Martha Graham dancer, you're mostly